A short story of Germany 1932. The year was 1932. Germany was a country in turmoil, grappling with economic collapse, political violence, and deep social division. This was the year of the German federal election, one of the most important and tragic moments in modern history. To understand the 1932 election, we need to understand the situation in Germany at the time. Germany was still very much reeling from the Great Depression, which had started a few years earlier, and millions were without work. Businesses were failing. Many had had their life savings wiped out. And for many Germans, life was filled with just hopelessness and uncertainty. The humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles after World War I only added to this ressentiment. Many Germans felt betrayed by their government, which they believe had surrendered too easily and left them to pay reparations that crushed the economy. This environment became fertile ground for extremist ideologies. People wanted change, and some were willing to look for radical solutions. And one party, in particular, was ready to capitalize on this: the National Socialist German Workers' Party, otherwise known as the Nazis. In 1932, Germany was a democracy, but it was one in crisis. The Weimar Republic's parliamentary system was deeply divided between several political parties, each representing vastly different ideologies. The main political players were the Social Democratic Party, or SPD, representing more moderate left-wing ideas, the Communist Party of Germany, or KPD, advocating for workers' revolution. Much had been seen in Russia already, and the Nazi Party, which was growing rapidly in popularity, led by, as some would say, charismatic but dangerous figure in Adolf Hitler. Each party had its own vision for Germany, but there was very little cooperation between them. Instead, the 1932 election was a fierce battle for control, with two presidential elections, parliamentary elections, and political violence dominating the year. The first major event was a presidential election in March and April of 1932. Germany's elderly president, Paul von Hindenburg, was pressured to run for re-election to prevent Hitler from winning. Hindenburg was not enthusiastic about running, but he was seen as the only candidate who could stand against the Nazis. In this election, Hindenburg faced Adolf Hitler and Ernst Thiemann, the Communist Party leader. Despite being an authoritarian figure himself, Hindenburg represented stability to the German people. He ultimately won the election, but Hitler had gained significant ground, and his popularity was undeniable. Then, in July, Germany had its presidential election. By this point, the Nazi Party had grown into a massive political machine, with thousands of stormtroopers, known as SA, intimidating political opponents in the streets. The Nazis campaigned hard, focusing on the failures of the Weimar Republic and promising a return to national pride and prosperity. Hitler presented himself as Germany's saviour, someone who would restore order and put Germans back to work. In July, the Nazis won an unprecedented 37% of the vote, making them the largest party in the Reichstag. But it wasn't enough to govern alone. Despite their success, they needed support from other parties, and here's where the Nazis' strategy became deadly. The Weimar government, desperate to maintain stability, began looking for ways to include the Nazis in power, hoping to control Hitler by placing him in a restricted role. This led to a series of backroom deals with influential leaders, including the former Chancellor Franz von Papen and industrial elites, who thought they could manage Hitler. Von Papen suggested that Hindenburg appoint Hitler as Chancellor, believing they could control him through traditional power structures. It was a risky strategy that underestimated Hitler's ambition, and it would soon prove to be catastrophic. By November 1932, another Reichstag election was held. This time, the Nazi Party lost some support, dropping from 37% to 33% of the vote. The economic situation remained dire, and some voters had grown disillusioned with the Nazis' violence and empty promises. But the Nazis were still the largest party, and Hitler was determined to claim power. While they hadn't won an outright majority, our government couldn't ignore. On January the 30th, of 1933, Hindenburg finally appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. This marked the end of the Weimar Republic and the beginning of Nazi rule. What many saw as a temporary political compromise turned into one of history's darkest regimes. Within months, Hitler used the new powers to eliminate opposition, setting Germany on a path towards dictatorial rule, wars, and genocide. The 1932 German elections is a haunting reminder of what can happen when a democracy is pushed to its limits. Economic hardship, political fragmentation, and a loss in faith of the democratic institutions creates a perfect storm for extremists to survive and even to thrive. The story of 1932 is a warning. Democracy can be fragile. When people lose hope in the system, and when the leaders fail to address their needs, history shows us that extremist voices can take hold. So, what can we learn from 1932? That preserving democracy requires constant vigilance, understanding, and unity, even in the most challenging of times. Thank you very much for listening. If you would be kind enough to give a like to this video, it would be very helpful. Enjoy your day. Ta-ra.